UFO World Congress, and I have another very important guest lecturer who is going to talk about another subject we haven't dealt with. His name is Vladimir Terziski. He was formerly from Eastern Europe, now living in Los Angeles. He has master's degrees in physics and electronics from Tokyo University in Japan. He is a UFO researcher. He is lecturing. He's got photos and things to show about what went on in Germany, about crafts that are built here on this earth by us, by governments. I mean, his papers, his pictures are phenomenal. So please don't go away. We will be right back with Vladimir Terziski.
The first, in my opinion, this is the father of all German saucers. This is a vertical raising hybrid design of a helicopter and flying saucer. It had V1 buzz bomb engines at the end of its propeller. It could raise at 110 miles an hour, reach an altitude of 60,000 feet, and have a speed of 500 miles an hour.
So you're saying originally the Germans, the original UFOs, were helicopters?
Well, usually when we invent something, it is a hybrid between the old and the new. So inevitably, the Germans went through the inevitable intermediary hybrid stage of a half helicopter, half UFO. They discovered very quick that if they increased the mass, and they would get a far more efficient design. This is the Schriever's Flügelrad, or flight wheel, which is basically a flying wheel, a flying fan with adjustable pitch of the blades, and it had the same probably V1 engines to spin the wheel around the stable cabin.
You know what I'm just thinking though? If the Germans were working with the extraterrestrials, right? And the extraterrestrials had ships already, why did the Germans have to go through
Well, this is how the things are in the universe. You are supposed to climb your peak on your own. You're
So
not supposed. They would probably generate quite a bit of negative karma if they provide you with a chairlift to take you to the top of the mountain. They may guide you from time to time, but everyone has to do his climbing on his own.
So they're not just going to say, this is a UFO, this is how it's built.
Oh no, oh no. They would give a clue. Try and spin a salad bowl, or add an existing engine to something else and get an unexpected effect.
Let's look at some of the pictures and tell us how these things are powered.
This is the most bizarre UFO powered by compressed air and water from your garden hose. Victor Schauberger, which was another genius, a forestry official from Austria, and a genius of a type of the Tesla type, built a 3-4 feet diameter saucer that had inside a helical coil, mathematically optimized coil, and he was running compressed air or compressed water inside that coil, and this saucer was rising up the surface.
So they started with little models, just
and they tried all different technologies to spin that brute mass. This is a design by Henry Cohen, that his lenticular aerodyne. It was too complex in my personal opinion, and I doubt that it got off the ground or it could fly very well. But it was an important experimental stage, because in this design, there's no time to go into engineering detail, but we see the precursor of the far more advanced saucers of later days.
Well, this would be about, what, 1940, would you say?
Late 30s, early 1940s.
Okay.
This is probably 1940.
Okay.
Then we have another
This one?
design. This is the Belonzo flying saucer, which is an upgrade from Honda's model. It's a flying fan type saucer with a cabin for two and a rocket engine on the bottom for horizontal propulsion. It had a diameter of 45 feet, 15 meters, and it could fly with a speed of 200 kilometers per hour.
So now we're going...
This would be about 1,300 miles an hour, much faster than this is basically approaching Mach 2.
Oh, okay.
This saucer went through numerous major design modifications. They added some stabilizing fins, and later they arrived at their first operational fighter saucer, which is the Belonzo Schreiber meter disc. It was,
when you say fighter saucer, you mean they were using this during the war?
well, in the book Intercept But Don't Shoot by Renato Vesco. Renato Vesco, by the way, was the research and development chief of the Italian Air Force during the war, and being in the same pack, they were getting all the information, as were the Japanese on the German saucer development. It's a brilliant engineering book. He gives instances of several dozen encounters of German saucers with Allied bombers with devastating consequences for the bombers.
So they were using them?
They were used. They couldn't build them in a great quantity. I mean, they had jet fighters from 1939, but they basically fought the war till the very end with piston propeller fighters.
Could Allied planes, you think, shoot down these saucers?
Basically no, because these saucers had a speed of 3-4 times faster than most primitive models.
So they're out.
Exactly. And actually, by the way, you just showed the public how the American pilots arrived at their name. They were called the Foo Fighters because they were swooshing by so fast they could hardly see anything.
I always wanted to know, do you have anything that shows what the Foo Fighters are? I was always curious about the Foo Fighters.
Actually, I don't have unfortunately I don't have the picture with me, but just one more second. This is a saucer built in the late 40s, 45, by Miete, and I don't have much information about it, but I suspect that this is a rocket motor driven saucer that basically could go in outer space. It didn't need the oxygen in the atmosphere. It didn't have an air-breathing turbojet engine as the other models had.
So you're saying by the end of the war they were off this planet and out of here?
Yes.
Okay.
And these are other profiles. We see that this is a passenger-type saucer. It has large cabin compartment, up and down, very symmetrical. And in my opinion, it could easily go in outer space and reach the moon in an hour or two.
And this is 1945. I want to
Exactly.
keep the chronology of this. Okay.
Actually, the most devastating design that the Germans arrived at is the
Look at this.
is the Belonzo Mitte Schreiber saucer, which basically had the same arrangement as this Avro disc. Funnily enough, I found this sketch in a 1955 Look magazine. An Avro disc that was supposed to be built for the military. It's a turbojet saucer with counter-rotating compressor turbine disc that counter-rotates inside the spinning hull of the saucer. And in the middle of this whole thing is a gyroscopically stabilized cabin so that the pilot wouldn't spin with the saucer into insanity.
And this was technology of the German government.
Well,
Earth
this was technology of the German secret black projects, Earth technology. Any nation who could build a jet fighter plane had the technology, had the materials, had the fuel to build such a turbojet saucer. Another important detail of the Look magazine article is that the Germans developed huge underground production facilities that were miles long.
But can I say this? This is part of some of the other work that we've been showing on past shows. There are, this is what we call like the underground tunnels.
Yeah.
where any number of things could be going on and still exist today.
Oh, well, they do exist in Germany because it's impossible to fill them up. They had huge galleries, 15 meters in diameter, 15, 20 meters, and kilometers long. They had assembly lines for V-1s, V-2s, Messerschmitt jet fighters, for any fighters that would be fully assembled, raised with an elevator at the end.
Well,
and take
this is the elevator. This is so amazing. We saw this on the slide today. This, if you can see this in the camera, these are little UFOs all along here, saucers, and when they lift it off,
one is lifting through the tunnel, a gate opens, it flies away, and the gate is closed. The Germans had these arrangements from 1943-44, according to the book of Renato Vesco, which was published 3 times in the United States in the 70s. So all we are talking here is basically public domain, mass circulation information.
Well, you had said at your lecture that these tunnels went all the way as far as Canada? Was that?
No. Actually, what happened is the headhunters of the advancing Russian troops and the American troops pick up all the German scientists. The meter disc that we saw, this one here, this was built in the BMW factory near Prague and Bratislava. I've heard numerous rumors from my Czech friends about saucers being built and tested in the BMW factory. It was overrun by the Russians, and Mittel was promptly sent to Siberia, and nobody ever saw him again. And the Russians feverishly continued this research later on, which gave rise to all the ghost rocket, probably to the ghost rocket stories over Scandinavia, Sweden, Italy, or simply the Russians.
Is this the Billy Meyer material that he saw ships? Well, his were a little bit later.
Oh,
than that.
No, it's much later.
He came more into the 70s.
It's much later. But Billy Meyer also claims in his contact notes that the first German saucer rose in 1942 to an altitude of 10 kilometers and reached a speed of 2,000 kilometers an hour, almost Mach 2, which was 3.5 times faster than the fastest piston propeller fighters of the Second World War. The most interesting of all German saucers is the electromagnetic design built by Schreiber. This is Schreiber. It was built in 44-45. I've seen it was built in several models from 15 meters to about 75 meters, which means from 50 foot to about 220-30 feet in diameter. On one of the German sketches, released much later and much altered by the German government, I found the strange word living compartment, which means that this is a very large ship that was specially built for space travel.
Okay, this is just a comparison. Could you explain what this is?
Well, this is kind of a study of the genealogical lineage of later American designs coming directly from German saucer designs of the mid-Second World War. This is the Belonzo Miete Schreiber flying this on the bottom in an artist's rendition here, and in a drawing that shows the 3 exhaust nozzles, swivelable jets packed in groups of 3 around the periphery of the saucer. So the only thing that was, the cabin is the same, the air intakes were slits here, here we see holes instead of slits. So the only change that was done was that the exhaust pipes were increased, and now they cover the whole surface of the ship. Basically, these are minor cosmetic changes, upgrades in the design. But the whole construction is basically the German construction. The first Russian and American rockets were blueprint copies of the V-2 German rocket, as are basically 80-90% of all post-World War military designs.
Can I ask you this? Our camera person said that, we have a minute, that this center part of this ship, okay, kind of resembles the stealth?
Well, resembles the cabin of the stealth bomber in its aerodynamic shape. Obviously, this was a very high-speed saucer, and we see here only rocket exhausts, but no air intake. Obviously, it carried its oxidizer inside the hull, hydrogen peroxide or liquid oxygen, and it didn't have a need to breathe air from the atmosphere.
What came to my mind is, have you ever met anybody or spoken to anybody who was on one of these saucers or has seen one?
I think everybody that was on these saucers was taken care of in 45, 46.
Like killed?
Or taken to the research establishments of the superpowers. The Russian ones in Siberia, or to the British ones in Canada, in British Columbia.
So there aren't too many people around, or if there are people around, they're not talking.
Saucer drivers.
Damn. Well, it'd be fun to go out a little.
Many people have seen. Actually, I have this Freedom of Information Act release documents of Allied POWs in Germany observing saucer craft raising behind huge fences of some secret compound, and actually the tractor engine cut down, died down the moment the saucer started working and lifted and flew off. Then the tractor started working again, and when the saucer returned after some time, the engine was cut again.
This is now?
No, this was 1943.
Oh, way back.
So even then the German saucers were showing these engine damping effects that we are now so familiar with as side effects of the operation of saucer drives. This is the report, one report that I know of. My friends, as I said, have told me that there are rumors in Czechoslovakia about saucer design in the BMW factory there.
Well, what appears to be coming out is that in every major country, there are sources somewhere, either below ground or in hangars somewhere. I mean, this seems to be the consensus of what we've been getting.
Exactly. Billy Meyer said in '75 that there are 5 or 6 governments on Earth that actively pursue saucer research and development, and that there is a government on Earth that has built a nuclear-driven saucer of 150 meters in diameter, which is 450 feet.
So
Back
real
in
quick,
75.
the original first ones on Earth were powered how? The very first ones?
Were powered basically with pulse jets and standard aviation turbojets running on aviation kerosene and air from the atmosphere.
Okay, and
the
then
next were powered with rocket engines. Basically, the V2 rocket motor arranged in a saucer configuration to spin the body would create a very feasible and space-going saucer. It would run on kerosene and hydrogen peroxide, or later
hydrogen peroxide, you can do your hair while you're in there.
exactly. And later on liquid oxygen. So basically on a truckload of kerosene and a truckload of oxygen, liquid oxygen can go to the moon and back in 4 or 5 hours.
Really? I guess it's okay, then what
And actually
came
the
next?
Germans did go to the moon and Mars during the war.
You think it's possible that Hitler, when he was done, I mean, could he have just, you know?
Well, I think it's highly likely. It's highly likely because he has to be either a very egomaniacal person to decide to go down with his sinking ship. He could have chosen this. I mean, he was a strange character.
Well,
we all know.
I mean, he could be deceased,
But
and, you know.
his most brilliant scientist, for sure, opted for the South Pole. Actually,
Oh yeah, South Pole information now.
South Pole information.
Okay.
There is a brilliant book by Harbinson called Genesis, fictional novel about the Nazi top scientists developing saucers in secret, packing them at the end of the war in transport submarines and going down to the South Pole to their base that was discovered, that was organized at the end of the 30s in the Neuschwabenland, which is the present-day Queen Maud land, if I'm correct. About 30 Nazi submarines were not
A photo we could show or
accounted
hold the
for.
book up?
This is an interesting book by Christoph Friedrich, who examined who wrote about Nazi polar expeditions before the Second World War, when they were prospecting for their base. It was a free land then, and anyone could state a claim, and they did it legally according to international law, and they state quite a tremendous claim on South Pole.
So you're saying that they hooked up into the South Pole?
Yes, and basically there are about 30 missing German submarines that fled their Baltic ports and were never accounted for, or some of them that later surfaced in Argentina and Argentinian ports with skeleton crews and basically empty cargo holds.
All right, now, getting away from the science of things that have to be on the audience's mind. The war is over. What happens to all these ships?
Well, obviously the Germans needed materials. They needed food. They needed people to work in these bases. So naturally an abduction scenario comes into mind. They were taking these things for free from around the world. But Germans also would take like 5-10 minutes to fly to Argentina, pick up the needed cement from a construction site, and go back. If one would discover mysteriously disappeared.
You mean these ships were used, just used?
They were used
like taking a car to
basis.
work, you just, hey, I'll take my UFO and go?
Well, the Germans used them for supply purposes and for defense purposes. A friend of mine gave me an official Navy documentary 1-hour film in color, very good quality, about Admiral Byrd's expedition to the South Pole. There are so many people that claim that this never happened. After I saw the film, I found several very suspicious things. In the film they say that they were there to scout and to map the natural resources of the South Pole, to discover new resources. But Admiral Byrd took several air carriers, a battleship, an armed submarine. He took 4,000 troops. Even I've heard rumors that there were British and Russian troops in that expedition.
Excuse me, we're down to the last 1 minute, so there's still a million questions going on in my mind. Basically, okay, you told us the scientific things. The ships, in other words, are still being used.
Yep.
Like, in other words, to avoid a traffic jam. No, seriously, the ships are being used now?
Oh yeah, I think that after the failure of Byrd's expedition, I mean, he retreated in 6 months, after 6 months in disgrace, an arrangement was used, a reach at between the Germans and the other superpowers, and later all superpowers have been going on in parallel together in space research.
And what you're talking about that runs all of this is what we call the secret government.
Yes, exactly. This is the government that runs the moon bases, built jointly by Americans and Russians, the Martian bases, basically the alternative 3 scenarios true.
Well, I wish we could talk on and on and on. I have about 1,000 more questions, but they're telling me we're out of time.
Thank you very much.
So I thank you very much, Vladimir, for coming. We thank you for joining us on the Metaphysical Experience, and a graphic will be up. If you would like to write or call Vladimir, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, welcome to Visions. I'm Valley Amon, the New Age reporter. For those of you that are tuning in for the first time, welcome to the program. And for those of you who are return attendees and watchers of the program, thanks for tuning in once again. You know how I do really appreciate your calling in and writing in, and I thank you all the time for it, and I continue to do so because I really believe that sharing that adds to all of our abundance, and my gratitude is with you entirely. We've been having a lot of very unique programs on during the period of time that Visions has been in force. And today's program will be absolutely no exception. You know, we live here in Los Angeles, and as a New Age reporter like I am, I just feel like I am in a mecca of information on all different types of topics, and not wanting to focus too heavily on one topic or the other, and staying very non-denominational in terms of information searching. Today we will present a topic that has not been well covered up until now: ufology. I was fortunate enough to meet Vladimir Terziski, who is originally from Bulgaria, at a recent meeting having to do with the Expo, and I feel very grateful that he has said yes to coming on the program today. He has an enormous broad range of information from all over the world to share with us today, so let us welcome him to the program. Welcome, Vladimir.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for being here. Thank you for being here. Well, I know you have brought quite an array of photos and articles and different things with you today to share with our viewers, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I thought we should really get into a little bit about your background. I don't think anybody really grows up and says, gee, I think I'll study UFOs when I'm 5 years old. How is it that you came about in your education and studies to do some of the work you're now involved in?
Well, actually, I was 5 years old when I pulled my first volume of the Russian Great Encyclopedia from my father's bookshelf, and I opened the first volume on aviation. So this was my, how should I say, first encyclopedic search. I've been fascinated with flying machines, flying contraptions for all my life. So keeping this fascination high, about 15 years ago when I went on a scholarship to study in Tokyo, because Japan is a very open society for UFOs. On prime time television they showed a 2-hour documentary on Billy Meyer that was seen by 30 million viewers way back in 1980, while here, for example, this particular case in Switzerland has been debunked and ostracized by the official party line ufologists.
It does kind of seem that you'll see a panel discussion about UFO once in a while here in the United States, and you'll have an individual, maybe 4 or 5 individual scientists, physicists, ufologists such as that have certain information with them, and at the end of the line, number 5 or 6, is some person sitting there going, I don't believe it. Now, they never say why they don't believe it. It's just a total, they just don't believe it. Really, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to think about it. Nothing. So.
Well, such people serve a very useful social function. They preserve society from an economic meltdown by too speedy spreading of this stressful information, opening a race, a civilization, to the fact that it's not the only race, these are not the only thinking beings in the universe, is the most stressful cultural, historical, philosophical event of its history, according to our observations or according to ET channeled information. So it has to be done real slow, like a controlled, sustained nuclear reaction. We have to prevent the social nuclear pile from melting down. And this is exactly what the skeptical lobby is doing. So.
It's kind of interesting, though. It seems to me that the slower we get information sometimes, the more frightening it is, because we feel as though something has been withheld from us, instead of saying, this is what we found, and that's it, and just kind of get over it. It's like, is a divorce a happier situation if it takes 10 years, or if it happens and you spend your next 10 years recovering? I'm not sure which one is true.
On the other hand, so much of the information has been withdrawn by the terrestrial governments. Well, our whole history has been riddled with secret societies, with secret knowledge, with secret sciences, with occult knowledge that was not for the masses. And the 20th century governments are no exclusion to this rule. On the contrary, they are trying to keep the bottleneck of information flow from the other races to ours as narrow as possible, and they would of course like to position themselves in control of this bottleneck to maximize the gain.
I would like also to mention to my viewers today that in no way is this program designed today to frighten or incite anyone's emotions. I just felt it very interesting. Vladimir's information and his research is very fascinating, and I suggest that if you feel confused about it at all, to just take a deep breath and just kind of listen and watch and see what we can all learn by more of the things that we're about to hear. But I just wanted to mention that to you because I do not have that intention of being like some UFO presentations are designed to incite people, to make them absolutely, you must believe this before the show's over, and I never want to be that about information that we present by any means. So tell us where you went from there. I mean, you really have a collection of interesting articles, photos, film footage. You handed me a tape and it really had some fascinating film footage on it. How did you begin getting all of this?
Well, I've just finished my several videos that I've prepared. I'm about to finish my first book on the same topic. 2 months ago we started the Graduate School of Ufology, as we are jokingly calling it, in a local community center in Santa Monica. And I'm applying through the bureaucracies of several universities for a regular ufology class, Introductory Ufology 101. There are only 2 classes in ufology in the United States and that I know of, and 2 in the Soviet Union. Maybe there are some others, but probably all the ufology classes in the world would be less than the fingers of my 2 hands. And I would be glad to add one more to the one more class. My interest started 15 years ago in Japan, and it really blossomed 6 years ago when I emigrated to the United States as a political refugee. By the way, last week was my week I got my citizenship out, so I became an American citizen.
Just last week?
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Makes it even nicer to have you here on the show. Not that being a citizen means everything, but it's nice to have you on board with us, with your openness, and it's always good to have wonderful new people here. And may all the others exit. Why don't we begin by getting into some of the information you brought today? Would you like to just go ahead and start getting into some of it?
Yeah. Actually, one little introduction to my brief presentation here, talking about secret society, secret knowledge, secret information withdrawn from the general public. I do personally believe in all the stories that circulate in the energy community about alternative energy sources. I do believe in the stories that Tesla had an electric-driven car that drove for 3 years, receiving its electrical energy from a small wooden box that was a Mori generator of free energy. There are dozens of successful accounts and reports of such inventions that have been tested and are secretly tested by the military. I do believe also in stories about suppressed alternative cures of basically all the major diseases that we have on the planet. So along these lines of suppressed energy inventions, suppressed medical cures, suppressed labor-saving and time-saving devices,
yes,
I think that the information that has been suppressed by the governments regarding more advanced modes of aerial and space transportation, that this information has to be finally brought to the public. It's very important to realize how much of the alien visitations on this planet are actually terrestrial design. It's very important to know how big is the terrestrial component of these visitations, because my studies of what the Germans built before and during the Second World War have told me that basically the Germans had 50 years ago the necessary technologies for a standard little gray abduction scenario. So it's very important to answer the question what the Germans had 50 years ago. And if we can answer that with certainty, then it's very easy to make the assumption of what our governments have nowadays.
I think that's one of the things that I was so taken with by your information as you prepare to do that, was the fact that you have collected a lot of data about technologies about which we absolutely know nothing.
I was astonished myself after I started digging in the literature, and I repeat, this is a public domain mass circulation literature. I try to stay away from military guys or guys with associated with intelligence services, from falcons and condors, the well-known informers, to some of the present-day ufologists. And I was astonished at the quantity of information that I found. Of course, my first ideas about German saucers came from certain tabloid sources. I have a special opinion about the tabloid literature. But then I started digging in old German newspapers, and there is a flood of articles that appeared in the 50s in Germany from engineers that work for the Third Reich. And little by little I discovered an incredible story. After the war, some of the engineers escaped to Spain. There is an article in Denver Post from November 47 talking about electromagnetic rockets, which are saucers with electromagnetic propulsion that were built for Franco by German engineers. An Argentinian article about the famous mass sightings of 47 and 48, claiming that they were all Nazi inventions that were flown from certain secret Nazi bases. And so I began to realize that there may be some truth behind these tabloid sources of strange flying devices. The more we dug into the literature, the more astonished we became. This is an article from Spiegel magazine from March 1950 talking about the Schriever flying wheel, Flugelrad, which was a pulse jet or turbojet driven saucer, basically a flying fan with a lot of propeller blades along the periphery. Another article in a German illustrated weekly magazine of the tabloid kind, talking about the same saucer. This is basically the only source of information about three of the designs that were built by the Germans. The Schriever disc of 1940-41 that had a horizontal speed of 2,000 kilometers an hour, which is basically 1.5 times the speed of sound. It is not Chuck Yeager that beat the sound barrier, but the Germans with their first flying saucers. Air Marshal Göring is known to have ridden in one of these. A later model with a more powerful rocket engine for horizontal propulsion and stabilizers is rumored to have made 4,000 kilometers an hour, which is 3 times the speed of sound. Victor Schauberger, a forestry official and a genius of the Tesla kind, made 2 other models, small 3 feet diameter copper models that had no moving parts. The only thing that was moving inside was compressed air or water from the garden hose, and they were so effective that one of them crashed through the roof of his lab when he was testing it for the first time. Another German article about wonder weapons made by the Nazis at the end of the war talks about Untertassen, about flying saucers. This is a Spanish book published by Antonio Rivera with a picture. I'm about to get the original picture of it. This is a saucer made by the Fokker company in the 50s, utilizing designs that were first tested before the end of the war. A Dutch book has a very blurry picture of a piston engine, propeller-driven saucer built by Messerschmitt, by the Messerschmitt company. And on and on and on. Henry Coanda, a French aviational engineer and genius, built one of his first flying models in the early 30s. The more I dig into German books, the more I realize that it is not 45 that the first saucers were flying. It's not 40, but it is in the early 30s that the first crude models were tested. In one of the latest German books that we found, there is a very detailed drawing of the Schriever flying disc. It was 14 meters in diameter, basically a 5-story building diameter flying wheel that was spun around with 3 standard Messerschmitt 262 turbojets. An interesting thing here is that there are no seats inside the saucer and no seat belts, which comes to a little bit of saucer physics, that basically every flying saucer is able to negate not only the gravitational mass and so to lift up, but also the inertial mass, which is an important detail about some later German developments. There are different models of this craft. Some of them were not 15 yards but 75 yards in diameter. This may be one of them. We see that this is much larger. In the subsequent versions, they added the stabilizer fin. The first military model that was basically their first operational fighter saucer was a joint project by all their saucer luminaries, Belonzo, Schriever, and Miete. And for the first time, they produced a custom-made donut-shaped turbojet engine that was in the body around the cabin. The cabin was dropped in the middle of the craft. And in a book by Renato Vesco called Intercept But Don't Shoot, Renato Vesco was the research and development boss of the Italian Air Force before and during the war. He talks about many instances of such saucers attacking with great success bomber formations of the Allies over in the skies of Germany. Another strange weapon that came from the incredible collection of German bizarre inventions is the secret weapon number A7, which is a anti-gravity flying hovering mine that was flying in the sky waiting for the bombers to approach. This is a blurry picture taken in the 50s of a saucer that is built very much along the German designs. We see the same turbojet exhaust on the periphery that would spin the whole saucer. So the more I was reading in the literature, the more I realized that these fictional illustrations, by the way made by Jim Nichols, one of the best UFO artists in the country, were based on some truth. Funnily enough, in no other place but in Look magazine from June of 1955, I found an article by a Canadian aviation engineer about a possible saucer design built by A.V. Roy, which is the same as the Avro Corporation. Many of us remember the Avro discs of the 50s and 60s that couldn't fly. Well, these were the discs for the press that were designed not to fly or to wobble clumsily. But the real discs were of a much better design. They were actually so effective that if the pilot is not careful, the disc would go into Earth orbit, and then somebody must go and pick it up, because these are air-breathing turbojet engines that suck the air through these openings, and if they go in outer space, there is no air anymore to take them back to Earth. Anyway, this was a custom-made turbojet engine with the exhaust at the periphery of the craft that were helping to spin the whole craft. Later and more advanced models had rocket engines in outboard engine pods, like outboard. This is the first outboard motor saucer. again from a German article of the 50s. And finally, we come to the Kugelblitzes and the fireballs, the ball lightning and the fireball. These were automatic, radar-guided with television control, automatic proximity fuses, anti-aircraft weapons that also had special emitters of strong electromagnetic waves that were able to dampen and to kill the engines of the bombers. And a friend of mine found this interesting picture here. It is a good, probably the best candidate of a Kugelblitz in flight. It's a kerosene burning device, so we could see the heavy black smoke in the back as if coming from a badly tuned diesel engine. The interesting thing is that this picture was taken in early 50s over Mount Rainier in Washington State. These were the models that the Americans captured from the Germans and started feverishly testing them, as did the Russians and the British. I've heard rumors, again from my favorite tabloid sources, that the Germans went to the moon still during the Second World War. And going back to my collection of engineering solutions, I realized that the best candidate for an exoatmospheric saucer would be the Mete-flying disk. If this drawing is all true, we see a rocket-driven saucer with the rocket exhausts in the back that has no air intake. So I would speculate that this is a rocket-driven rather than a turbojet saucer, carrying its oxygen on board, the same fuel and engine formula as the Germans use in their V2 rockets. Same fuel, same metals. Even one of my friends observed that this cabin looks suspiciously similar to the cabin of the B-2 stealth bomber, which means that it's a cabin designed to fly at tremendous speeds.
Vladimir, I know we only have a few minutes left in the program, so if I could impart upon you to come and sit with me for a couple of minutes, because I know you have more and more, and wow, it's very, very fascinating, and I wish we had 2 hours so that you could go on with more of your presentation. A couple of the other things I wanted to ask you about was the politics of the information that you have. What are the implications of just knowing about this type of information?
Well, the implications can be very serious because, well, it's dynamite information. The question is, what happened to all these saucers? Did the Germans dynamite them all and then surrender to the Allies, or did they take them with transport submarines to the South Pole, to their South Polar bases, and did they establish a strong German Nazi colony based on eugenics principles? That probably was the reason for Admiral Byrd's strange naval expedition to the South Pole in '47, where he went with 4,000 troops and aviation and aircraft carriers trying to chase the Germans out of their bases.
Is there any suspicion that these craft that were proposed or made, that they were copied from landed craft from other places, or is this just something, do you feel in your investigation, that we on this planet just thought this stuff up?
It's a very good question. I've heard stories that the Germans were contacted by a particular extraterrestrial race way back in the 30s, after they saw the development of the German, how should I say, population policy. They left in the early 40s, and another race took over, maybe the little grays. This is the alien explanation of the origin of German saucers. I have heard the cocaine explanation about the German saucers. All German officers and engineers were given daily doses of cocaine that would help them better meditate and tap to higher databases and sources of information. It could be all of these plus the most simple and usual explanation. Creating anti-gravity is so easy that it can be done by any engineer. It can be basically a simple spinning of an object. If an object is spun fast enough, it would fly away. No fancy hardware, no fancy physics. It's very simple. And so lately, presently, this whole trust of the government propaganda and the party line in ufology that all the saucers that are built by our government in our underground bases in cooperation with a particular alien race that we have a diplomatic treaty with, that they all came from the aliens and that they are so far advanced that we can't have something like that on our own for the next many hundreds of years, which was the bottom line of a recent Fox documentary.
Yes.
But my studies of German saucers prove that, on the contrary, it's extremely easy to build a saucer, and the very reason of spending zillions of dollars on the Apollo program to bring 3 men on a bicycle to the moon, basically, as the Alternative 3 film says, is just to keep the exclusivity of the club and to keep third world nations from building such cheap craft that can go on a literally on a truckload of kerosene and a truckload of liquid oxygen to the moon and back in 2-3 hours.
Vladimir, our time is up, and I cannot thank you enough for coming and sharing just a little bit of the massive information that you have, and I hope you'll join us again sometime.
With the greatest pleasure.
With my pleasure.
We have to see what happened with all these designs in the next 50 years.
Good idea. To our viewers, I want to thank you very much for watching today. We've been in conversation with Vladimir Terziski, who is a flying saucer design technology expert in the way that I see him. Has a lot of information. If you would like more information about this program, please take down our phone number and get on our free mailing list so that we can let you know all the different areas that we're in. We're in a whole bunch of them now, and that might be of interest to you. I want to thank you very much for watching, and we will see you again real soon. Thanks for watching.